Laura, a famous model, returns to her small-town home when she learns that her old boyfriend is having a relationship with her aunt. The name of the film is Suburban Secrets, released in the year 2004. It's an American romance drama starring Alicia Angel, Tina Tyler, Kay Kirtland, John Samuel. During a photo shoot, Laura receives a phone call from her sister Winifred. Laura learns that her ex-boyfriend, high-powered attorney Nelson, is dating her aunt Cynthia. Not only that, they are making plans to move in together. While she tells Winnie that she's pleased, Laura is emotionally hurt. After hanging up, Laura asks her photographer Janine for a few weeks off. Janine agrees, commenting that she has some good shots for her editor. Janine comments that she has an awful schoolgirl crush on Laura. Laura is initially put off, but then passionately kisses Janine. Meanwhile, in Meadow Springs, Nelson visits his law partner and sister Judith. Judith invites Nelson out to a romantic dinner, but Nelson explains that he is expected by Cynthia. At Cynthia's cabin, Nelson arrives to find Cynthia. Making himself comfortable, Nelson approaches her from behind. After several minutes, they started to romance. At a cafe, Winnie asks her co-worker Louise why she pushed Winnie so hard into telling Laura about Cynthia and Nelson. Louise admits that she is a potential novelist and that she is writing an expose about the town's sexual goings-on story of famous model Laura. Hearing that Winnie warns Louise not to write about her sister Laura. After the romantic session, Janine proposes Laura that she loves her a lot, and Laura mentioned she also likes Janine too, but she tells that she didn't want to go any further with the relationship because she doesn't have any time for that in the way of her passion. Aunt Cynthia and Winnie's boyfriend Johnson working in a same place. Cynthia asked Johnson for today's editorial news to publish, as she is a chief. Winnie comments about her aunt to Johnson that she's becoming younger day by day. Later, Winnie tells about her friend Louise writing an expose about the town's sexual goings-on. Johnson advises Winnie not to end up as one of the characters in her novel. Nelson arrives in her office and Judith arguing to Nelson not to call her a sister, and angry about the documents he made are irrelevant, and advise him not to meet the woman Cynthia, and Judith didn't like her brother to date Cynthia. Laura arrives in her town and she meets Aunt Cynthia, both Cynthia and Laura talking about their careers. Laura is worrying about her Aunt Cynthia because she is dating a man who is younger than her. Cynthia mentioned about Nelson that he is more passionate in bed and love. Laura looks awkward because Nelson is her ex-boyfriend. During the work, Nelson thinks about her sister Judith. Nelson went to Judith's house. He tries to control his feelings towards her. They both talk about their relationship, how they love each other at their childhood days. Judith talks about how his brother Nelson falls for her in love at the age of 12. Later, they got into a romantic session. Laura, her sister, and her aunt met up at the restaurant. They talking about Nelson's act, and Laura mocks her sister Winnie that she is the only person in their family who didn't sleep with Nelson. Cynthia tells that her sister Susan, Laura's and Winnie's mother, may also share a bed with Nelson. Later, Nelson comes to meet Cynthia and tells her that he didn't went to work yesterday, and he spent a night with her sister Judith. After hearing that, Cynthia becomes angry and starts to yell at him and become upset. In Judith's office, Nelson meets Judith and told her not to do the same mistake again, and he tries to avoid her not to get in that relationship. Judith becomes angry on Nelson. and he left her office. In the next scene, Nelson meets her ex-girlfriend, Laura. Laura asks about her aunt and their love. Later, Laura asks him whether he is still in a relationship with his sister or not. Then Laura invites him to her room for a drink, and he stayed with her whole day. Meanwhile, Judith arranges a person, Patrick, to follow her brother Nelson. Patrick tells her brother's location and motel name where Laura is staying. Winnie asks Johnson about her dress and looks and tells about her friend Louise working on a scandal stories and wrote the overheard conversation of her boss Judith and her brother in a descriptive words, and Winnie worrying about her family not to get part in Louise's story. After a while, Judith went to see Laura. Judith threatens her to go back to New York, but Laura talks about a little fight going on between Nelson and her aunt because of Judith. Later, they both get into an argument which is filled with L words, and both become tempted because of that kind of arguments. After that heated argument, they get into a romantic session. Laura requested Judith to stay for a few more hours, and Judith told she is Aish to stay for a while, but she has to go to Trail because she a famous lawyer in that town. Later, Judith tells Laura to call if she need any help in Trail and told that she will meet her if she visits New York. Winnie saw Louise Derry, that she has some desire for Winnie. Later, Winnie told Johnson about the dairy and gives him the spare key of Louise's apartment and requests him to record everything that happens between Winnie and Louise tonight. Johnson asked the reason. Winnie told that Louise wrote about desire on her, and she told that Lousy wrote about her aunt's secrets and also more about Nelson and Judith's secrets. She told Johnson to release the video in case Louise publishes the stories that mention about her family. And the time comes, Johnson entered into Louise's apartment. Both Winnie and Louise arrived and hide in some place, and they talks about some stuff. And Winnie asked Louise to explain about the dairy that wrote about her desire on Winnie. Louise told Winnie that she loves her from the beginning of their work. After a while, they become romantic, and as planned, Johnson records everything on his video camera. And Louise finds out about that and asks him to come and join with them. And Laura visits her Aunt Cynthia and told her that she slept with Nelson and Judith also slept with him. She added that Judith has holds on him and more obsessed on him. Cynthia told Laura that she understands Judith and Nelson's situation because she also had the same situation in her teenage years as she was obsessed on her sister Susan. Laura shocked after hearing that her mother Susan and her Aunt Cynthia were in a close relationship. Later that, Laura also confessed to her aunt that she also had the same obsession over her aunt in her teenage, and still she has the same feeling and obsession for her Cynthia, confused as well as pleasured to hear Laura's confession. In the meantime, they become passionate with each other and started to romance. Later they talk about Judith, and Laura understands Judith's situation and confessed to her aunt that she also spent a night with Judith and told that we both enjoyed a lot. Cynthia told Laura to return to New York and that would be good for both of us in future, and requested her to do the work she loves. Laura met her sister Winnie and before she leaves.